Yesterday, we saw the great lengths that Donald Trump and his administration will go to abuse power in order to silence and intimidate anyone who disagrees with them. Federal prosecutors tried and failed to get an indictment of us from a grand jury. This is not a good news story. This is a story about how Donald Trump and his cronies are trying to break our system in order to silence anyone who lawfully speaks out against them.
The president is using our justice system to weaponize against his perceived enemies. This is an authoritarian playbook that many of us have watched play out abroad over and over and over again, except now we're seeing it in the United States.
U.S. President Donald Trump and his Department of Justice faced a major setback as federal prosecutors in Washington failed to secure an indictment against 6 Democratic lawmakers who angered Trump by encouraging active duty members not to obey orders from the administration that they deemed illegal. It was significant that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, led by Jeanine Pirro, a Trump ally, authorized prosecutors to go before a grand jury and seek an indictment against those 6 Democratic lawmakers who previously served in the military or U.S. intelligence agencies. Even more striking was that a panel of ordinary citizens serving on a federal grand jury in Washington firmly refused Donald Trump's attempt to portray their dissent as a criminal act that deserved prosecution. The Department of Justice sought to charge the lawmakers under a criminal statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 2387, which covers sedition, treason, and subversive activities. Soon after the release of the video, Trump called it seditious and said the lawmakers should be locked up. Following the news of Trump 2.0's failed bid, Senator Mark Kelly wrote on X, "This is an outrageous abuse of power by Donald Trump and his lackeys." In another video post, the former Navy captain and retired NASA astronaut warned Americans, saying, "Trump wants to make an example out of me so they can scare Americans like you."
Hey folks, it's Mark Kelly. Hey, you may have seen the news that Trump's DOJ tried and failed to charge me with a crime simply for saying something that they didn't like. Let me be clear about this. This is not good news just because it didn't work. It should be alarming to every American that this administration tried this in the first place. This comes after the Department of Defense already censured me and started this process to demote me. Trump wants to make an example out of me so he can scare Americans from speaking out against him. Don't let him succeed. The most American thing any of us can do right now is to continue to speak up.
Senator Kelly has also sued War Secretary Pete Hegseth for moving to reduce his retirement rank over the video's content. The 5 other House members featured in the video were Jason Crow of Colorado, Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire, Chris DeLuzio, and Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, and Elissa Slotkin of Michigan. Whether or not Pirro succeeded is not the point. It's that President Trump continues to weaponize our justice system against his perceived enemies, Slotkin wrote in a post on X. In another video post, Slotkin ripped into Trump, called out his intimidation tactics, and encouraged the public to speak out against the bullying.
Physical intimidation and legal intimidation so that other people watch this episode and say, not for me, I'm just not going to get involved. I'm not going to push back on Trump. The truth is, by sitting on our hands and doing nothing, we also were incurring risk, right? That the investigations kept coming when we were quiet. So if it's going to be bad when you're quiet, you might as well go on offense and have this conversation publicly. You know, look, I'm a sitting senator. I could create a legal defense fund. I could go on TV shows like this. The average person, you know, sitting home in Michigan, can't do that. You know, if the president comes for a small business owner or a community leader or a mom who goes viral on TikTok, you know, that legal intimidation and the threat of having to get a lawyer and pay for that lawyer and the physical intimidation when his followers follow what he says and threaten you and threaten your parents, That is enough to keep a lot of people quiet. And that's the point. The intimidation is the point. Physical intimidation and legal intimidation so that other people watch this episode and say, not for me, I'm just not going to get involved. I'm not going to push back on Trump.
Critics of the Trump administration described the move against the 6 lawmakers as a blow to free speech, saying it reflected the president's pattern of targeting those he views as political adversaries. Following the failed indictment, Senator Mark Kelly and Elissa Slotkin held a press conference and warned the American people about Trump's abuse of power.
Yesterday, we saw the great lengths that Donald Trump and his administration will go to abuse power in order to silence and intimidate anyone who disagrees with them. We learned through the media that federal prosecutors tried and failed to get an indictment of us from a grand jury. This is outrageous. I want to be clear about something. This is not a good news story. This is a story about how Donald Trump and his cronies are trying to break our system in order to silence anyone who lawfully speaks out against them, and to send a signal to every American that they better think twice before they speak out, or they might be next. I want to emphasize this because it's important. Federal prosecutors went to a grand jury to seek criminal charges against members of the United States Senate for something we said. They tried to have us charged and thrown into jail because we said something that they didn't like, because we repeated what the law actually is. This happened here. This is straight from the authoritarian playbook. This did not happen in Russia or China. In Russia and China, we see these things. This didn't happen decades ago. It happened less than a mile from this building in the United States of America yesterday. And it was carried out by a federal prosecutor who got unanimous Republican support in August. It was authorized by an attorney general who is serving as the president's personal attack dog. Folks, this is the master alarm flashing for our democracy. It is threatening the very foundation of our system, that we have a right to free speech, to lawfully speak out and protest our government without fear of retaliation.
Last night, at the direction of President Trump, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro attempted to persuade a grand jury to indict us on criminal charges. If things had gone a different way, we'd be preparing for arrest. Fortunately, her attempt failed, and a group of anonymous Americans upheld the rule of law and determined that this case should not proceed. Just to review the bidding, this started with a 90-second video in November that a group of us organized, all of us with military and service backgrounds, simply restating the law in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that military members had a duty to refuse illegal orders. We said nothing more than everyone from Secretary Pete Hegseth and Attorney General Pam Bondi have said themselves out of their own mouths. For that, President Trump said that we should be investigated, arrested, and ultimately hanged. And that's exactly what he had Pirro and Bondi do yesterday. They had opened an inquiry in December, they carried it forward in January, and when we refused to sit for a voluntary interview, in 7 days' time, they went in front of a grand jury. But to be clear, this is not about the content of this one video. Let's call it for what it is. The president is using our justice system to weaponize against his perceived enemies. I think that we've come to a really sad moment in America where the paradigm of leadership has come in completely reversed. In 2026, instead of looking to our elected leaders like the president as setting an example, it is now up to individual citizens in their private capacity to uphold the values of democracy, free speech, liberty, justice. As Mark said, this is an authoritarian playbook that many of us have watched play out abroad over and over and over again, except now we're seeing it in the United States. Yesterday, 20 anonymous Americans who we will never meet, who made up that grand jury, told us more about the values of America than Jeanine Pirro or Pam Bondi or certainly this president.